Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll mostly just be having a chat about the process of interviewing and how I scheduled my interviews and how I went about with the work that I did before the day of the interview, and everything afterwards. And this is for everyone who's applying to residency this upcoming cycle. And for all of you, I hope you find this helpful and I hope you take something away from this video. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the video. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, I'm a first year medicine resident in the United States, and I'm currently doing my residency in internal medicine. And it feels like just a couple days ago, well, it was a year ago, I was in the shoes of applying for residency, and I remember the stress and everything that came along with it. And in today's video, I'm hoping to just like help ease some of that stress and walk people through what I did to successfully match into my number one residency spot. So first things first, by now everyone is probably like anxiously waiting for the interview invites to come in. There's nothing really you can do. You've submitted your ERAS application, so it's all out of your hands now. So take time to do other things and focus on other things, despite how difficult that sounds and how hard that is to like focus on other things. But there's truly nothing else you can do. You just have to wait. But as soon as those interview invites start rolling in, the first thing to do is, this was actually a mistake I made initially in my first couple ones. I was too slack in regards to scheduling the interview. As soon as you get that invite, you immediately want to drop everything you're doing and go schedule that interview. And I say this because the first invite I got, I was actually driving back from a clinical clerkship, and I got the email notification that I was invited to interview, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll just wait till I get home. And it took me about 10-15 minutes to get home. By the time I got home, all the spots that I wanted were filled. I was only left with the spots that I didn't want. And so I was like, wow. In retrospect, what I should have done is pulled over and immediately gone and scheduled the interview on a date that worked for me. And that helps me transition into the next point, which is you want to kind of plan out when you want to schedule your interviews. And by that, what I mean is, if you already know your top programs that you're going to rank if they invited you to interview, you want to try and schedule those in the middle of your interview block. So for example, I give myself from the month of November till I give myself end of January to interview. I didn't want to interview past January because I was traveling in February. So November I took as like my practice month. So my top programs, I didn't schedule any of them in November. It was mostly December and January. Most of them were actually end of November and December. So why I did that was the first couple interviews that I did in November were almost like a practice run. So those were programs that were within my safety, what I call safety programs. Those were the first couple ones that I did, help me get all the nerves and anxiety that comes with interviewing, help me get all of that out. And also you get a sense of the kind of questions that they typically ask, and you also get a sense of how to answer and present yourself and how to just go along with the interview process. So that's one advice I'd give. And then also speaking of, in regards to safety programs, the way I chose the interview programs I was going to apply to, where I use what I call the 50-30-20 rule. That means 50% of the programs I applied to were programs that I felt comfortable, that I felt like I had a good chance of either matching into or getting interview invites to. And then 30% of those programs were programs that I call my reach programs. So those were programs that, like they were my desirable program, the programs that I was like, I'm not too confident in if I'll be invited for an interview in these, but I might as well try. And then the other 20% were programs that I was almost certain that I was going to get invited to interview. So for example, these would be programs that were associated with my medical school, for example, or programs that I had a very good connection with, or programs that I felt like, okay, with my step scores, my board scores and my accomplishment, like I felt like I was like a good candidate. I was a very strong candidate. Now, with all that said, there's still some surprises that come along with this. Some of these programs that I thought were my, safety programs, I did not get invited to interview in some of them, and that's fine. That happens. That's why you have to diversify it. So, anyways, with that said, you send out your applications, you start getting the interview invites. You definitely want to schedule them as soon as you can. Drop everything you're doing and schedule them. Some of these programs will come in different platforms. So some of them you have to schedule right on the ERAS website. Majority of them I found during my time, I actually had to schedule via a third-party program called Thalamus. And it was something that was pretty new to me. So I must definitely speak to someone who's gone through the interview cycle and ask them to walk you through what the Thalamus app looks like and how to navigate it, or you just download it. It's an app that's got like a brain, if I remember correctly. So download the app, play along with it, figure out where what buttons are, because once you get that invite, it tells you to, once you get that interview invite, it tells you to go onto the Thalamus app and schedule your interview. So definitely get yourself familiar with the app and how it works. And some of them schedule the interview via Zoom. So there are different platforms. So that's good to keep in mind. The next thing to actually keep in mind is different time zones. This was something that almost got me in trouble actually for one of my interview programs. So if you're someone that's applying throughout the United States, there are very different time zones in the United States. So for those of you that aren't very familiar with the United States and Canada's different time zones, one state in the US might be a different time of the day compared to a different state. So, for example, states in the West Coast, so California, they're in a different time zone compared to some states in the East Coast, like New York City, Pennsylvania, Boston, versus states in like the Midwest, like Michigan, in Indiana. So if you're applying all over the US, be aware of different time zones and don't just assume everything is all in the same time zone. Look out for, is it Eastern time zone? Is it Mountain Standard time zone? Is it Pacific time zone? So look out for the time zone and make sure you have the right time so you don't show up late for your interview or completely miss the interview. So that's something else that's very important to keep in mind. Something else that's also very important to keep in mind is I'd advise having like a journal or a book or any kind of notepad, anything to write down your impressions and your thoughts of the programs, because after a while all these programs start to like mix up in your head. I'm confident in everyone that everyone's going to get multiple interview offers, so I'm saying this from that perspective. But anyways, after you go through all these interviews, a lot of the programs will start to like, you start to confuse them and mix them up. So definitely have a notepad, keep note of whatever stands out to you as you're interviewing. Write it down right away. That's what I did. I'd always just write down the day of my interview as I'm interviewing, whatever stands out to me or whatever I love about the program. I'd write it down right away. I'll write down my top 3 takeaway from the program. I'll write out what I'm looking forward to the most in the program, what exactly about the program drew my attention the most, or what stood out the most to me. These all help later on when I have to rank the programs. And then another thing to also keep in mind is most of these programs have a pre-interview mixer, and that's typically the night before or maybe a week before your scheduled interview date. You get to hang out with the current crew of residents at the program without any administrative personnel involved. So it's just a time to like chat and like, hang out with the residents and get to pick their brain and see what they truly feel about their programs. I attended practically all of those for the programs I applied to. It gave me a good sense of the vibe and the camaraderie amongst the residents that worked there, because these were people that were going to be my peers, that were going to be my seniors when I started, and it just shows you like the culture within the program and what that's like. So I definitely attended every single one, and I wrote notes as well. The ones that stood out to me, I wrote things that stood out to me during those pre-interview mixers. And then on the day of the interview as well, there'll be little things that come up. It could be like questions that other people ask. Definitely pay attention, be engaged, because some of those questions might be questions that you just hadn't thought of them, and they could either make or break it for a program. So definitely be attentive and pay attention during the program. It is a long process. Most programs start at like 8 a.m. and they could go as long as like 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. So it's almost a full day event, whereas some will start at like 9 a.m. and only go till like noon. So it depends, but sometimes they go for a long while. And if it's still virtual this year, you're just sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours, back to back to back. So it adds up. But definitely try to stay as engaged as you can and do your research about the program beforehand. Definitely know what similarities you have with the programs, what you like about the programs, so that during your one-on-one time you can shine. Definitely have some questions to ask at the end of your interview, because that shows your interest in the program. And if there's any form of like unanswered question, either at the beginning of the interview date that you didn't quite get during your one-on-one time, is the best time to like get clarity on that. So in regards to the structure of the interview date, it's typically the same for most of them with some variation. So you typically start out in the morning or the afternoon, depends on what time coast you're on or when they schedule your interview. But the first part of the interview is typically administration goes over the structure of the program, what to expect during your training years, what makes the program unique. They do an overview, and that could last anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour. It depends. And then after that, you could have some people come speak to you about some more things about the program. It could be the program director will come and speak to you about what makes the program unique or whatnot. And then after that, you typically break into your small sessions or your one-on-one session for your individual interview. Most programs, you typically have about 2 or 3 interviews that are either one-on-one or in group sessions. So it could be like one with the program director or the assistant program director, one with like another faculty member. It could be someone in the same faculty you're applying to, or someone in a subspecialty that you're thinking of going into. And then it could also be one with like the chief resident or a senior resident. So you typically have about 2 to 3 one-on-one or small group interviews. And then later on in the day is typically like more information about the program. So it could be like the different tracks that they have within the program, or it could be time for any further unanswered questions, or time for some like little games to get to know each other better. And then there's typically a sign off to end the day. Some programs will also offer you the opportunity to attend their noon conference, and I enjoyed that typically because it gave me an idea of like, ooh, that could be me one day. These are my peers, and this is how they think, and rational rational questions, and think about different scenarios. So some programs had that, some didn't. It depended. But at the end of the day, you then get like an opportunity to ask any further question that hasn't been addressed during the day. But yeah, so that's typically what the structure looked like. So for everyone that's applying right now, just remember, it only takes one. You just need one interview, truly. You just need one person or one program to like you. You just need one program to be in your court and in support of you. And that's all you need. You just need the one. But they typically say if you get, the more interviews you get, obviously, the more chances you have of matching. So I know this is a very stressful time, but everyone's going to do great. Just keep your chin up, keep working hard, do your research before your interview, get to know the program, also go through your own CV, get to know everything in your CV and your resume, because any question could be asked. They could ask you about that hobby that you put down in your CV that you thought no one would ever ask about. They could ask about your research. They could ask about some form of community involvement that you put in. So also review your CV, know everything well, and be ready to talk about any of those, and be ready to tie those into why that makes you a great candidate. But you're all gonna do great, and I hope this video was helpful. I hope it shed some light into some things to expect and also some preparations. Keep your chin up, keep your head up, everything will be all right. And feel free to leave any comments below of any questions you might have. And also, if you haven't yet, please give the video a thumbs up if you find it helpful, and please subscribe to the channel, as that helps a lot. And I just want to say one last thing and clarify that all these opinions are thoughts are simply my own opinions and my own thoughts. They do not reflect the institution or the hospital that I'm affiliated with in any ways. These are simply my thoughts and my experiences. And yeah, best of luck, everyone. You've all got this. All right, catch you on the next video. Ciao.